Nebraska irrigates more acres of farmland than any other state in the nation. In fact, 5 states, Nebraska, California, Texas, Arkansas, and Idaho, account for more than half of the total irrigated acreage in the U.S. California, however, used the most water according to 2010 data. It withdrew 20% of the country's total. At this week's Power Farming Show, Nebraska Extension's Derrel Martin presented a seminar on water consumption in Nebraska. We talked with him here and began by asking how groundwater levels had changed in Nebraska over the last 60 years.
There was a study that was done by the USGS to look at kind of on a statewide volume balance that's of water stored in the groundwater in Nebraska. And what they found, first of all, is about 2/3 of all the water that's in the Ocala aquifers underneath Nebraska. That volume of water is equal to about half the volume of water of Lake Michigan. But what they found when they compared the levels in 2011 to those in 1950 is that for Nebraska, the volume of water in storage had only changed about 1%. Other states like Kansas and Texas had seen major reductions of water in storage. Now, that doesn't mean we don't have distribution problems and groundwater declines in some areas of the state. We certainly do. But in other areas, we've had water levels that have risen because we've diverted water from the streams. So right now in Nebraska, the balance, we're about where we started.
Why is this so different? Nebraska, Kansas, Texas, South Dakota has done well. Why are Nebraska and South Dakota so different?
Well, the main reason there would be that we do have this surface water supply. But when I irrigate, the water I use that I pump from my groundwater or from the stream, it has to either come from groundwater or from the stream. So we've developed a lot of irrigated land, and so if our water table hasn't dropped much, then that water has mostly come probably from what would have been stream flow.
Can you tell me where water goes or how we consume it when we use it for irrigation?
Well, let's think about the center pivot, because that's what we use on about 85% of our land. The water that we pump, first of all, it's put into the air, and it could drift or it could evaporate in the air. A lot of people think that's a big number, but it's actually pretty small. Some water evaporates off the crop. And then a lot of it is, what we mean by consumed is water that's used by the crop as evapotranspiration. So the liquid water we pump, that's converted to water vapor as it evaporates or transpires from the field. You know, that number is by far the biggest part of what we pump with modern systems. It could be 75–80% of the water that we pump is actually going back into the atmosphere. Some of the water might run off the field, some might also deep percolate in some locations. But yeah, about 75–80% with a good pivot is being used by the crop.
As you think about the future of water, Derrel, how do we enhance sustainability in the state?
Well, okay, sustainability is really looking at the supply we have and the uses that we have in a watershed. And we shouldn't confuse that with efficiency. Efficiency is how much of the water I remove is actually used by the plant, and that has a lot more to do with productivity. The sustainability depends on how much water we use per unit area, and it depends on how much land area that we manage. So first and foremost, we have to get those water uses in balance and the acres in balance to be able to sustain that long-term supply. We may be able to do some things to convert water consumption that's not beneficial to those areas that's more beneficial.
Such as?
Well, getting rid of invasive species or phreatophyte water use maybe on crops where it doesn't mature very well. Maybe I could use that better on plants where it does, even from a dry land perspective. And then anything we can do to enhance the storage of water in the soil so that it doesn't evaporate in the spring. So residue cover on irrigated land is a good example that might improve.
Do you also feel that creating reservoirs and storing water and using it later could be beneficial?
Yeah, that'd be a practice we might call augmentation. And in that setting, yeah, what we try to do is take the water from the stream during periods of high flow, store it off stream, either in a reservoir or in groundwater, and then we let that water come back to the stream at a time that's more beneficial, either for the stream or for another purpose along the stream. Nebraska's done very little of that. Most of our neighbor states in the West have really used that augmentation scheme a lot. And so it's something I think Nebraska has to take a hard look at.
Is there anything now that you see that would threaten the way that Nebraska crop producers are able to irrigate their crops?
Oh, I don't see anything magic that's coming down the line. I do think we're going to have to deal with this question of sustainability long term. You know, what's driving irrigation water management, not only in Nebraska, but at the western United States, is meeting our in-stream flow requirements. And those are either driven by interstate compacts or, in our case, also by endangered or threatened species. And so we don't have any choice but to meet those. And so we're going to have to adapt in order to meet those. And that's going to take a lot of different forms, I think. Reduce area in some case, maybe reduce how much I pump, maybe changing some crops, and then maybe being able to use the water that we do pump in a more productive way. So maybe the farmer, if they do have to make a change, maybe that economic impact won't be quite as big for them.
We recently looked at how Nebraska's Natural Resources Conservation Service was helping to manage this state's groundwater through the Ogallala Aquifer Initiative. You can see that interview with Craig Derrickson in the November 20th episode of Market Journal.